Kim, it's a huge difference. As soon as you cross into Grafton, you notice the snow's coming down, big flakes, and the snow accumulations are huge. Take a look at what we're seeing here in Grafton. I'm going to jump over this snowbank and get a good reading of snow for you over the big drift. I have measured anywhere between 6 and 10 inches of fresh snow here in Grafton so far. Right now, this particular spot, I'm picking up about 9.5 inches. So it's safe to say that as soon as you get out of Albany, as you head towards the Rensselaer Hills, we're already seeing a lot of snow from this system that's been sticking around for a couple days here. In addition to the snow, we saw that temperature plummet as we headed into just Grafton alone, and those winds have significantly picked up. So certainly feeling like a winter wonderland, maybe a cold winter wonderland out here. We're going to continue our journey, though. We're headed to Stephentown, so we'll check in with you in the next half hour. The area of low pressure sitting off to our northwest in Canada right now is going to swoop its way across the Great Lakes and give us some widespread snow as we head through Thursday night into Friday. Not a whole lot. We'll take a look at that snowfall forecast in a minute or two. But
if you're listening to us on the YouTube podcast, thanks so much. Please subscribe, like, and share this video. We interview people all over the country and all over the world that have a lot of things to talk about: news, politics, sports. So we kick around a lot of stuff. Today, we have someone that I watch every morning here from Florida online, and my family does from Rhode Island. This is Christina Erne, and you can watch her weekdays as a meteorologist at WJAR News Channel 10, that is NBC in Southern New England. She's a huge Disney fanatic also, which is right up my alley too. And she also just got married recently. So congratulations, Christina, on that. And thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you. I'm glad to be on. I'm glad that you're able to tune in from Florida too. Sometimes I feel like I wish I could flip flop with you and be down in Florida at times. The weather's been so crazy here. I mean, just a couple days ago, it was like upper 70s. Now we have windstorms. I mean, you know how New England weather is. It's up and down. It's crazy.
Now, can you talk about, being a meteorologist? Some kids, I know my friends that are in media, they dream of being the news anchor, the reporter on the big TV. They don't really talk about meteorology, but it is an extremely important thing because obviously people need to know whether to grab that umbrella when they go out to work. So, how was that dream of meteorology? How did it come to you, I guess I should ask?
So my dream of meteorology actually came a little bit later in life. Of course, I'm still young, but what happened is I went to Boston University, and right from the get-go, I knew that I wanted to be a TV reporter. I loved to tell stories. I loved to write. And eventually in college, I learned how to shoot video, write stories, put them together. So my first job out of college actually was as a TV reporter, not as a meteorologist. So I shot up to a small market up in Bangor, Maine, and I kicked things off shooting and writing my own videos. But I've always had this real deep love for science. I always have, even going through middle school, high school. I loved learning about earth science in particular. I guess I never was able to put two and two together about how you kind of merge science in with this love for TV. It didn't click for me initially. So I started out as a reporter, but as I kind of grew and developed in my career, I was watching the meteorologists and I thought what they did was so interesting. And I also loved going out and covering weather. I loved being out in big snowstorms, which sounds crazy because a lot of TV people think it's nutty to be out there when it's like minus 40 degrees or windy or any of that. But I loved it. So what I did is I started interning with a couple of the meteorologists. And there was a couple in particular who said, we need more women in meteorology. And that's when it really clicked for me that my love of science could actually be merged with my love of TV. So I got my start as a reporter in Maine, but I got my first meteorology job in Albany, New York, where I was working in it was called our mobile storm tracker. So it was like a mobile van that went around. It took all of the local temperatures, air pressure, all of that. And I got my start basically storm chasing in Albany, New York, which was super fun, a great way to kind of throw you right into it. But it really taught me a lot about what the field was all about. And I really got to learn very quickly what meteorology was all about.
Well, when you say storm chase, I think of Twister immediately, the movie with all the tornadoes. But I want to talk about this. You know, I know your dad had a big influence on you, and I know he was in the military, did a lot of work with saving whales and with the military. So that was a big influence, you would say, also as far as, you know, that influence of, you know, saving the environment, knowing what's in our environment on all these disruptions that, you know, create disruptions in our environment. And
Exactly. So my dad in the Coast Guard did a lot of rescuing when he was in the Coast Guard, when he was a lieutenant commander. And I grew up on the ocean basically because he would always be out and about. He would be away for months at a time, but when he would come back, we'd get to go on the ship, we'd get to tour it. We had our own boat down in Cape Cod, so we'd be out fishing. So I really grew to love the environment and the ocean, and I learned how to protect it basically through him and through him showing me the beauty of it. And later in life, he actually transitioned out of the Coast Guard into the Air Force. But what I learned about his career is he was actually working in weather information systems. He wasn't a meteorologist, but he had this passion also for the atmosphere and the air too. So in a very roundabout way, I ended up choosing a similar career path to my dad, which I think is really special.
so I want to talk about this. A lot of people that I speak to say that climate's always changing. Temperatures are going up and down. It's a natural cycle. To me, yes, that's true, but they also, that's how they discount climate change by saying this. What would you say to somebody that says that?
So what I would say to that is our climate does go up and down in very, very small variations. Also, you look back in time, you know, we hit prehistoric times where it was actually very warm when there were dinosaurs. We then think to the ice age where it was very cold, but these were actually very, very small temperature variations overall. When we look at a chart of when the Industrial Revolution took place to now, we have seen this incredible temperature rise with just no sign of any global recovery. And way back in the day when we barely even have records of it, but we see it in ice levels and whatnot, levels that have never been reached before are now being reached. And what we've seen within the past 25 years alone, well, at least since the Industrial Revolution, let me say that, since the Industrial Revolution, we've seen almost a 32-degree temperature rise, average globally. And the World Health Organization puts 35 degrees as kind of the danger zone. So we're getting really close to that. So what we're seeing is that, yes, our temperatures do vary, but that's also what climate change is in the first place. It's extreme variations. It's not just the temperature rising. For instance, we can get these extreme cold spells, which is kind of, for some people, that doesn't sound like global warming, right? If we get these extreme spells of cold, but it is because the chemicals that are in the air and in the atmosphere, at times they can just create these storms that are more powerful than ever before. That's why we've seen bigger hurricanes, more tornadoes, more wildfires because of more dry conditions. So we've always seen variation, but we've never seen it like we have now. And there's just no signs of it stopping because we're not doing anything to stop it. Also, I'd like to add that way back in the day, in Ice Age, you know, for instance, these times, there was no added chemicals being added to the atmosphere. There was no extra CO2 production. The only methane production was from, you know, from people and cows, right? So, you know, nowadays we have this added layer. We've never had that before. So the variations were normal back in the day, but ever since the Industrial Revolution, it's this new factor that we just now know that we cannot recover from.
We're seeing, you know, the rising of the seas. Here in Miami and Florida, in South Florida, we're seeing small rainstorms flood streets where people can't go down. They're having to build seawalls, as you know, as far as people living on the ocean. You know, is it going to be a problem? Because I'm hearing a lot of this talk, Christina, that there's going to be refugees, whether it's in this country or around the world. We're seeing in Italy, in Venice, it's sinking. We're seeing, obviously, like what I talked about, Miami and all the coastal areas in this country. Are we going to see people moving towards the middle of the country, Minnesota and all these other places, because of that sea level rise on the, the corridor of the Northeast, but also going down south?
I think we're going to see a blend. So first off, our country and a lot of nations around the world, their entire foundations are built on coastlines, boats. From the beginning of time, that's been trade and travel. So I think regardless of what happens with sea level rise, there's always going to be this need to keep major cities, towns, and outposts along the coast, but it is going to be very costly. And flooding is one of those issues that is not really thought about readily because it happens so slowly. Mm-hmm. Because sea level rise is only, an inch or two every 10 years. So it doesn't sound like a lot, but ultimately it is so costly because if only that inch or two is added up in very low-lying areas like a Miami, like in New Orleans, like the Rhode Island coastline, places like this, when you add up just that small amount of sea level rise, we have millions of dollars of businesses that have to either move or tear their businesses down and move somewhere else. We have homes that are flooding, people who have to buy into more homeowners insurance. And then you have to factor in when a storm comes in. So it's not just, a little bit of water is rising, but it's also when a hurricane comes in or excessive rain, then you have an issue piled on top of an issue. So a lot of our concerns when it comes to sea level rise, when it comes to the melting ice caps that just can't recover within the winter season, it's a very, very costly endeavor for the coastline. But while I think there are going to be people who retreat further inland because they just don't want to deal with the cost of it, we are just a world where people are going to spend the money to be at the coast. It's just going to be really costly to keep having to move it back. That being said, these things do take a lot of time. Sea level rise is over, 50 to 100 plus years to see these small changes. So it's why we have to think about making the changes to our environment and prepare for these types of flooding or sea rise things early on, because we don't want time to keep stacking up.
Here in Florida, where I am, there's been a huge drought. You go by small ponds and a lot of them are almost dried up. We're seeing this all over the country, though, obviously, not just in hot areas. I know Rhode Island saw a lot of rain in the past couple of days, but, we're seeing these wildfires in Colorado, as I brought up earlier, also in California, and obviously Florida. Like I said, there hasn't been a lot of rain. Are you worried about this? Because we look at the aquifers, and if they're not getting this water, then, obviously in Florida, they keep building houses because people are coming down here because of, there's no state income tax, but people need that water to shower, to, for irrigation. So we're seeing those issues. Also, the bottled water companies are pumping out of the aquifers and putting the water into the bottles and selling them all over the country. So that's also hurting the water distribution. So what can you tell us on as far as the drought goes, and how all these, especially down south, like I said, in places like Florida, even Arizona, where people are really migrating to because of the tax havens, there's going to be a problem with water in the future.
Yeah, well, I think the biggest thing to note about whether it's drought or excessive rain is that a lot of people think of climate change in general as just global warming, but in reality, climate change is just this. It's not just a temperature rise, but it's these extremes. It's extreme heat, it's extreme cold, it's extreme rain, and it's extreme drought. We get these wide variations that we just never have seen before. So we end up seeing drought in the Midwest, exactly where the Ogallala Aquifer is, the one that powers the majority of the country. And that's a huge issue because industries are drawing from it like never before because our population is booming like never before. But we're also dealing with climate change issues where we're seeing droughts like never before. So they're just not able to refill themselves. And that's going to be very costly for our entire country. I mean, not just on a health standpoint, people being able to shower, drink clean water, but it's also going to be an issue because these aquifers replenish farms, and farms are where our food comes from. And if we aren't able to produce food in our own country, then we're going to have to spend extra money to get it elsewhere outside of the country. So not being able to have access to water, of course, is a huge issue. And we see it in other countries. Clean water leads to good public health, but it's also going to, yet again, climate change is going to yet again cost us more money if we have to outsource farming more so than we already are to other countries.
Keep talking about water, and I think this fits the topic of water, and it's really scary to me, Christina, because I hear all this talk about fracking. We heard that in the 2020 campaign. There was a fight between President Trump at the time and Vice President Biden, who were fighting about, fracking in Pennsylvania. I've heard a lot of bad things about fracking, that the methane, which is extremely bad for the environment, being let up into the atmosphere, and that also contributes to higher volumes of warming, also creates earthquakes. We're seeing that a lot in places that there was never even talk about earthquakes, such as Oklahoma, such as Pennsylvania. I even heard, and you can correct me if I'm wrong because you were up there at the time, that there was an earthquake in Massachusetts not that long ago. Now, I don't know if that was contributed to fracking, but in general, we're seeing a lot of these earthquakes now in a lot of these places because they are fracking. So, what is the talk about fracking with you? Are you worried about this with the methane? And I've also heard a lot that fracking also contributes to contamination of water. Is that true too? What do you think?
It definitely can. Fracking, there's a lot of pros and cons to both, because fracking, while there's a lot of negative connotation around it because of people who live close to fracking sites have noted discolored water, things like that, it does release a lot of bad CO2 emissions, methane emissions into the atmosphere by doing it, but it also saves our country money that we would otherwise spend outsourcing what you get from fracking. So there's a lot of pros and cons to it, but we have been seeing a lot of detriment to the environment because of it as well. So like you mentioned, methane it's a product of fracking, and methane is one of our greenhouse gases. And you hear that term when you hear about climate change. It's one of the main chemicals that helps to warm up the atmosphere because it's not as able to escape the atmosphere. So it insulates our atmosphere, the greenhouse effect. So methane is one of those gases that is one of the root causes of why we are seeing climate change, temperature rise, global temperature rise. So, while I think fracking is probably not a great idea, especially when it's near where people live, communities and whatnot, I think a big problem of climate change globally in the first place is all of these little pieces put together. Fracking is an issue, but I don't think it's what we should focus on. I think fracking combined with way too much industrial pollution, combined with transportation, combined with decades and decades of no change, no policy change. I think it's everything packed together that's kind of our biggest concern.
Christina Erne here on Fire Breathing Rob, meteorologist at WJAR News Channel 10. I've been in Florida here for quite a while, 8 years. I've seen my share of hurricanes that, have hit the Orlando area and hurricanes that haven't. Last year there was 15 hurricanes that formed. With that said, I've been told, and you can give me from the horse's mouth as a person that's a meteorologist herself, that there's going to be a lot of hurricanes this year. So what the heck's going to go on? What should I prepare for as a person in Florida? Because I'm really scared, especially as a person that believes in science and believes in climate change.
So this upcoming hurricane season is interesting because we came off of that crazy one last year where we went Greek. We went into all the Greek letters. I was in a sorority in college, so I know all the alpha, beta, gamma, delta, epsilon, zeta, theta. I can do the whole thing. So I was golden last summer while you guys were dealing with it all. And basically, this summer's forecast, or this hurricane season forecast. They're calling it average, but what that means is that they actually just reevaluated what it qualifies to be a hurricane, and they just reevaluated hurricane seasons in the first place, because believe it or not, the past like 20 or so years, we were using old hurricane statistics and climatology from like 1981 up to 2010. So they finally, over the past couple months, reevaluated it and realized that our hurricanes are stronger than ever before because of climate change and these warming ocean temperatures, because warmer ocean temperatures lead to more storminess and more hurricanes in the Atlantic basin. So they're calling it an average hurricane season, but they're actually basing it off of the new information with more hurricanes that we've had over the past 20 years and stronger ones. So this year, when you couple it with warm ocean waters and a La Nina in the Pacific, that's going to give wetter and stormier conditions in like kind of the Florida area, the Atlantic basin. So I don't know if it's going to be as bad as last season was, but there is always the potential that more and more storms are possible for sure.
In general, what is going on with the allergy seasons? It seems like they just keep going longer and longer.
So basically, I think a lot of us have noticed how allergies have just gotten worse and worse and worse. What they say about allergies is that every 7 years or so, your body actually gets used to a lot of the allergies around where you live. But what we've seen over the past couple years, even the past couple decades, is that people are really no longer able to get sensitized to their environment, whether it's tree pollen season earlier in the season, or if it's grass pollen season, which comes in the springtime, late springtime, early summertime months. And what we're seeing with the environment and with climate change in particular is because we're seeing warmer spring days earlier in the season and warmer fall days later in the season, our allergy season is actually growing and growing and growing. And a lot of people, when they think of climate change, they think of the polar bears, they think of melting ice caps, right? You think about these things, you think about really hot days, but climate change is really all about these extremes. And a lot of things with climate change are things that you don't even really think about. So one of them is allergies. If we see many more days in the 70s in New England in late March rather than late April when we typically should see them, that means that a lot of our trees for early spring pollen season are going to start their production nearly a month earlier. And so that's going to extend our allergy season. And that's, you know, we think of that as something that just bothers us, right? We think of stuffy noses, we think of runny, drippy eyes or whatever, but it's actually very costly to our country and our world because allergies are a health concern. A lot of people, like even you, have it worse than others. You know, there are people who need to be on medication for it. I know people who even have to go into the doctor's office for shots for allergies. And so when you extend this pollen season, because we see warmer and warmer days, it actually costs the country more in healthcare. So that's just one way that climate change is more costly than just the things that you kind of think of.
We'll go into the audience questions. So these are more free-flowing questions. So Christina, what does a normal day consist of? I assume that you're going to get up pretty dang early to start your day.
Yeah, so I'm the morning meteorologist. Our show starts at 4:30 in the morning. So I actually wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning. Crazy, totally crazy. Luckily, I now live really close to the station, so I don't have very far to go. But I show up at the station around 3 a.m. And what a lot of people don't know is that I do my own hair and makeup. Most people on TV do. There's typically, unless you're on a national channel, you do your own thing. So I get in at 3 o'clock in the morning. I have an hour and a half to put together my forecast and put myself together in hair and makeup. But I am the scientist of the morning. So I get in, I'm poring over all the newest models from overnight. I'm putting together my 10-day forecast. We also build our own graphics as well. And then we go right on air at 4:30 all the way through 9 a.m. And my typical day includes doing the noon show. And then I come home, I put myself down for like a 2 or 3 hour nap So it's more of a sleep, I guess. And I get up so I can make dinner for my husband, so I can take our cat on a leash on a walk in the backyard because I am that person. Our cat's name is also named Navi, like Navi River Journey.
Yes, great ride. My mom loves that ride because it's relaxing and they love going on it. I go on it because it's relaxing too. But yeah, wow, that's funny how you named it. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah. And then by 9 p.m., I put myself down and I get, 4 or 5 hours, and you put the sleep together and I somehow 7 or 8 hours.
How did you, change your sleeping patterns to waking up at 2 and then going to bed at 9 and everything in between, I guess?
It's tough. And a lot of people just can't do it. I mean, a lot of people just choose the night shifts and that's what they can do. I've personally always been somebody who wakes up early and goes to sleep early, not this early, but definitely been able to adjust better because I function better in the morning. But I have trained myself to do things like after about 10 a.m., I can't drink any more coffee or anything else with caffeine. Because believe it or not, if I have it after about noontime, if I'm trying to go to sleep at 9 p.m., I just can't fall asleep. So just small adjustments like that. But, I've always been somebody who loves to be up early. So
is your husband in the morning too? Because if not, that's going to be pretty tough for you to get up and run out the door and not make any noise and not wake him up.
Oh, well, he has gotten so used to it that he sleeps right through it. It's usually just the cat that gets up with me in the morning, looking around like, what the heck are you doing? But he works the normal shift. That's why I nap in the middle of the day while he's still working, so I can get up and actually see him for a time.
Fair enough. Okay, the next question is, what do you do in your free time? I've heard you're a big workout freak. Is that correct also?
Yeah. So one of the first thing we did when we bought this house is out back, we have 2 sheds. We totally transformed one of the sheds into a gym. Wow. So we're psyched out of our minds because my husband and I, we love to work out. It's super relaxing. I've been really into everything from Orange Theory fitness workouts to CrossFit to yoga. I absolutely adore yoga. So we just do everything out in that shed. It's super relaxing. It also really helps to make me so tired that I fall asleep for my shift. So it's a twofer.
Fair enough. Okay, so I guess the next question was, how did you stay sane during the coronavirus pandemic? I'm assuming with, buying the house and all the work with that and working out would probably be your answer then.
And in addition to that, you'll absolutely love this. One of the things that we did in our free time is we would go on YouTube and we would watch Disney 360 videos of rides. You go on.
So he loves Disney also then.
Oh yeah, I grew up into Disney every single year. He grew up with Disney as well. So in our free time, we've watched like every Disney YouTuber that exists. We know everything about the parks, more so than we did before. We've ridden virtually all of the rides that exist from Hong Kong Disney to like all of them. So that in combination with working out and I also love to cook. So I began just doing a whole bunch of baking, working off the calories, and then watching Disney videos.
Yeah, that's great that you guys, I assume you have Disney Plus then also.
Sure.
Okay, fair enough. All right. So we're winding down to the last 4 questions. What was the biggest storm you ever covered?
Good question. When I was working in Albany, New York, when I was in the mobile storm tracker, there was a few times that we were tracking severe weather, because what happens in the Hudson River Valley is there's a lot of uplifting because of mountain ranges in the valley. So there ends up being a fair share of hailstorms and tornadoes. So there was one time in particular that we were kind of south of Albany and we were tracking a tornado, and which is interesting to say the least, to track a tornado, because we as meteorologists, a big part of our job is trying to keep people safe. That's why we do what we do. We're on air and we go show these live videos in person because we want to show people this is where you shouldn't be, because this is how dangerous it is. Well, we ended up putting ourselves right in the middle of a huge hailstorm, which is just on the outskirt of a tornado, and we were stuck in this van. It was me and my photographer, and we were live on air, and from what I heard back from the station later, they couldn't even hear my voice because the hail was coming down so hard, and we thought it was going to be denting the super expensive truck. So that was pretty wild. And then also, upstate New York gets incredibly cold. There were a few times that I had to go live in minus 40-degree wind chills.
Gee, wow.
Where you could only run outside for about 3 minutes, and that was it. So pretty wild extremes.
That is wild. So when you're on the show and you're in the studio and you're doing the weather and there's some sort of mishap, whether it's with the green screen, whether it's with, I assume you guys use clickers to go to the next screen, or if the camera's not on you and the camera's on, somewhere else, who knows? What do you do? How do you, recap and try to, maybe go to a different conversation, whether it's about coffee, sports, some other weather, whatever it may be? How do you change the subject?
Well, it takes a lot of years of practice getting good at talking on TV and banter and really keeping on your toes. We have mishaps every single day though. And it's a lot of people don't always notice it because we have gotten really good at kind of hiding those kinds of things. But it just comes with being very comfortable talking on camera. If you're nervous about being in front of people or being in front of an audience or being live, you're much more rigid and you're only focusing on that one thing. You're only focusing on delivering the weather. But when you're comfortable, when I'm in the studio, it feels like home. I'm just talking to my friends. I don't even think about the fact that we're live. I'm just talking and talking about what I want to be talking about on my own. I don't use a script. So when things go wrong, you can play it off one of two ways. You can completely ignore it and pretend it didn't happen, which I do sometimes. Like when I drop a clicker by accident, that didn't happen. Nothing happened, and just keep moving on. Or, we are people too, we're human. So if something funny or weird happens, we address it and you just say that, we made a mistake or whatever, just because the audience understands that we're just people.
Last question, favorite Disney ride, show, and park?
Okay, favorite Disney park, hands down, Animal Kingdom. So if you couple that with, I could choose like anything in Pandora, I guess, because it just blows my mind. But I mean, Splash Mountain, rest in peace. We have a little bit longer to enjoy that. That's always been a favorite. But I also love Thunder Mountain. It was one of my first big rides. And Disney. Show. Okay. Here's the good one. I absolutely love The Mandalorian. And it's pretty interesting because I never grew up watching Star Wars, like ever. I watched my first Star Wars movie like in early 2020. And my husband, then fiance, turned 30 just before COVID hit. I mean, we're talking like March 3rd. And I surprised him for his 30th birthday to a trip for Disney. And we went to Star Wars and saw all that stuff. So Mandalorian was like, I was right in the thick of learning about all Star Wars. And then Mandalorian hit. I was like, oh my God, mind blown.
So he loves Star Wars and you're just learning right now then.
I'm learning. I
appreciate that. And hopefully down the road, we can definitely do this again. I a little bit less as far as the time wise, but I don't want to take too much time.
Anytime, I'm always around, just hanging with my cat and hanging in Rhode Island. So just.
I hear you. All right, Christina. Hey, thanks so much. Stay safe and have a good day.
Sounds good. I can't wait to see it. I'll push it out everywhere. I'm excited.
Sounds great, Christina. I appreciate your time. Thanks so much.
Thanks so much. Talk to you soon.
Bye.